And hello, everyone. Today we are talking in AP World History. This is Unit 1, Section 1, and we'll be mostly talking about China's dominance of East Asia. We also will be talking a little bit about Japan and Korea, and we're actually going to throw in this part of Southeast Asia, Vietnam, into the mix because it does have some relevance into China's expansion. Um, during this time period in history. Our primary focus is going to be 1200 to 1450, but we have a map that shows quite a few things in China throughout the age. One of the things that marks the close this starts with the Song Dynasty, and we'll be going into some background, mostly focusing on the Song Dynasty, because in this period this area was taken over by the Mongols, which we'll be covering later on. But the Mongols kept the governance of China pretty consistent, so a lot of the things that we talk about apply. The red line is important. This is the Silk Road. This is going to be a feature throughout uh, the course, especially when we talk about Eurasia. And you can see that it provided trade from the eastern part of China all the way into Central Asia down to ports. And also from ports, China was contacting India, and then they would go to the Middle East, to Arabia, and to Africa. So goods would go that way. Remember, though, the distance, the further you go away, the less your cultural influence does impact, but your trade goods do affect. But culture was definitely, the Silk Roads did help provide this unity um, in China. China is an absolute big deal. One of the things that we will look at here is basically how the developments in China and the rest of East Asia between 1200 reflect continuity, innovation, and change. And one thing you can talk about is basically the continuity that's found in China, even though it goes through a period of conquest between 1200 and 1279, when the Mongols really start making life difficult for the Song Dynasty. The Song Dynasty between 1200, it really ends, it starts around 960 and it ends at 1279 or so with the conquest by the Mongols. But China itself, it absorbs very much the Mongols, and the Mongols adopt the Chinese system of governance, which really is what holds China together. They are a very strong, centralized government. And another historian has said, think Texas, you don't mess with Texas. China is a big deal, and they've remained a big deal. And they have been forcing the world in world history for over 3,000 years. That's saying something. So by 960, the Song Dynasty does form. One of the things that is very powerful is they have a strong centralized government. And we're going to talk about how they maintain and how they make sure that strong centralized government works. And it works very effectively. And it's going to serve China very well throughout its history. Chinese government is divided basically into six areas, and five of them are dominated by professionals who run the government. And these are called Confucian gentry or Confucian scholars. These were people who went through training. They had to study Confucian law, Confucian philosophy. They were tested on it and they knew it. They knew it well, and then they were able to administer. And basically, the only part of the government that operates independently is the army, which is under control of the emperor. But personnel is staffed by Confucian scholars. The finances, the taxes and trade, that's all recorded by Confucian scholars. The rites of passage and the rights of the culture and society, Confucian scholars are in that. Confucian scholars study the law, they dispense justice for the emperor. So, and then the building of public works, Confucian scholars are right in the middle of that too. So Confucian scholars are really what's holding, it's a bureaucracy that's holding China together. And China did a great job with census, like census building. And they really knew the amount of people that were involved, the trade goods that were coming out of that, how much money they were making, what were the problems. They kept really strong records. So Confucianism also is a cultural group because of its concept of obedience. Confucianism believes society should be in order. And at the top you have the emperor, and then you have the male leaders of clans, and then you have people who are not the leaders of clans under that male. Women are, women, if they were an empress, would obviously have strong say, but her guidance, and we see Empress Zhu does quite a bit of writing to other people, ladies in China who are in higher positions by their family. and say you need to fall in line where you belong in society. And if you do that, you'll be happy. So it's hierarchical. Everyone and everything is in its proper place. Citizens submit to the state, women submit to husbands, children to parents. And the way they guaranteed competence of these Confucian scholars was they had civil service exams. So they used a term called meritocracy, that you rise because you can do the job, not just because you were born in the right place. Now, it wasn't as democratic as it sounds because who could afford all the schooling? Obviously, if you're a peasant, you're going to have a hard time going through the years of training and learning that you had to go through. But still, it was based upon ability, and you could rise from humble means theoretically, if not always practically. So the civil service exam is a big part that allows China to have this very professional leadership and governance system. And what happened, this allowed the emperor to take care of the army and made them get a lot of money because they were just so efficient. And they focused on economics through long distance trade, through proto economic systems, which are small industries happening in localities. And they start reaching all the way to all through Afro Eurasia with Chinese goods and parts of their culture spread. So China becomes increasingly commercialized. The Silk Road, the Grand Canal that was mentioned in the prologue, is a waterway that connects them north and south. Um, and Chinese goods are all over the world. Their armor is the best. They have mathematic skills. They have silk. They have tea. They have spices. They have large amounts of rice after a while. So they're getting all these goods that they're sending, and they get so much that the Chinese start developing a system of banking using paper money. They're the first major use of paper money is appearing in China. Gunpowder is invented by the Chinese. Now it's going to be used later on very effectively by the empires, the gunpowder empires of Central Asia and Eurasia, and then later Europe. But the Chinese do invent it first. The Mongols use gunpowder, particularly with cannon. Um, Chinese culture does spread. Let's look at the map here. Chinese culture tries to spread. It does a better job at unifying these areas than going to Korea, as an example, and to Japan. Let's start with Japan. Well, Japan has an ocean between them and China. So, yes, they had contact, and the Chinese were stronger. Um, but Japan successfully resists much of China's idea. They are not a centralized government, they're decentralized. They become almost like feudalism, with the samurai and warlords having large areas of control and, in many ways, being much more powerful than the emperor. They resist Confucianism and they hold on to their aspect. A lot of it is ancestor worship and other facets. So they resist Confucianism. And one area that does affect Japan is in the architecture that's going to be used. Now, Korea is a little bit closer, but it's not by this main area. It's kind of an outpost. So they do take a lot of Buddhism, actually, some Confucianism, and it modifies with Japanese. Korea also is a decentralized state, and they develop a strong resentment for Chinese incursions into Korea. One of the areas that they resist very effectively is in language. They don't adopt the languages that are used in Chinese, and they keep theirs rather separate. To the South, Vietnam, when rice is found in huge amounts here, the Chinese want it, and at first they trade for it, and then they're just so much bigger, they just start taking it. And this creates a resentment that goes on to this day between the Vietnamese and the Chinese. The Vietnamese also resist Chinese culture. They do not really switch to Confucianism. They are Buddhist, and they actually have a syncretic of Buddhism where they have Buddhism as and have deity, and they give them godhood status, which is different than mainstream Buddhism, which is atheistic. Champa rice is a big deal for China, and China starts demanding it as tribute, and this adds to the resentment. Another aspect of Chinese culture is they don't develop that hierarchy, especially with regard to gender. The Vietnamese are small villages, and women play a very large role in these villages, and they resist the aspects, and they believe what's called nuclear family, which is probably very similar to families that we have in large part, not completely, but whereas you have a mother and father and they're working basically in partnership and with their children as a unit and not an extended family. And one of the reasons for this was the structure of Vietnam was village-based rather than city-based or large areas of control. They didn't quite have the resources to support that large number of an extended family. So they don't have that clan system. They have basically the structure we have of the nuclear family. The Chinese try to push their system on it. The Vietnamese resist. And the idea that they were taking tons and tons and tons of rice out of the mouths of Vietnamese and feeding them to China led to resentment. Culturally, Confucianism is blue, and we just have some ideas here about the cultural resistance. Japan is resisting it, and they're able to do it better because they have water, but they do adapt some aspects of Buddhism, and along with the aspect of Shintoism and ancestor worship, and their architecture does reflect it, but their governance does not change. China is a crossroads of trade, so you have a lot of cultural ideas. Buddhism comes in from India, and it makes big gains in China. And in many cases, it basically blends. We have that idea of a syncretic, two cultural ideas clashing together and each permeate the other. And so the Neo-Confucianism, which has elements of Buddhism involved with it, and a unique form of Buddhism forms in China that's different than it is in, say, Vietnam or Japan or in India, where it originated from. Okay, so let's go to the bottom line about China. China's large population, in part because of Champa rice, gave it a huge agricultural base, which led to them having enough people to develop manufacturing. So you see a lot of cause and effect, and you see a lot of continuity, but you see a lot of innovations and a lot of change, and it's based upon China's location, their ability to centralize and kind of dominate the regions around them, like Vietnam and Korea. And this led to great wealth because they had large areas they were able to control with a large food base, and then they were able to build manufacturing. That brings them wealth, having a common language, and the construct of Confucianism as a quasi-religious. Confucianism is atheistic, but it's religious sounding in the idea that it has very strong ideals, moral placements, and it's served very much as a religion. And this led to cultural unity of China, which made it pretty much unstoppable. They do fall into some downfall toward the latter part of the song, when the song are basically fighting for their lives against the Mongols, who they outnumber like 50 to 1. Yet the Mongols win because of their superior tactics and honestly the brutal efficiency of their army under Genghis Khan and then his followers. So that's what you need about China. Okay, have a great day. And remember, this does not take the place of you reading the textbook on your own. You still have to do the activities. You still have to take the vocabulary that's found in the textbook and align it by the themes of the course: governance, economics, social, technology and innovations, interactions with the environment, and culture. You still have to do these things, but this should give you some base content knowledge that you can hold on to. And when you see that vocabulary, now you understand it better. And remember, it's always a great day to be a rock.